So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. Like I mentioned before, we have a very full webinar today. We are going to be maxing out at 500 people. So with that, it will be a little bit of a challenge to get to every question. And we know there's a lot of questions, but go ahead and use that chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. And as you think of questions, just go ahead and type them in, and I'll answer as many as possible at the end of today's session. Now, if I don't get to those questions, don't feel like we're not going to answer them at all, because we get a report that has all those questions so that we can get back to you guys. All right, we're covering 4 major topics today. The first thing we're going to talk about are the types of prospects, because you have to identify, who your prospect is to know how to close them properly. Next, we're going to talk about the problem with options. And, we think that having a lot of options is a really good thing, but sometimes it's not. Next, we're going to be covering 7 closing techniques. So these are the things that you guys will probably really want to, be prepared to take some notes. They're your really solid key takeaways after we talk about some of the more conceptual things. And then we have just a couple final tips at the very end. And, as usual, I like to start every webinar with a thought or an idea to get us in the right state of mind for the content we're about to cover. And here's today's thought. Don't sell an apartment. Always sell yourself. If you want to keep your residents and your prospects from straying to your competitors, never, ever stop selling. More importantly, never stop selling yourself and the value that you personally provide. There's this saying that we've probably heard a million times, which is that the sale begins after the sale. And this means that you should never see your residents as someone else's responsibility. For example, if your residents have a problem with their dishwasher or their air conditioning, we're about to come into the summer season, so things like this happen all the time, you should be involved. And part of being involved means, taking care of your maintenance team so that they take care of your residents, checking in with that resident to make sure that they're happy with that maintenance request fulfillment. Make sure that customer experience was right on. You never want to wipe your hands of the deal. Wipe your hands of, okay, I signed this lease, done, this person's on to someone else. Because as far as you're concerned, things are just getting started when the lease is signed. I think, I always hear about management companies trying different methods for, taking care of residents, for leasing apartments, for maintenance, all of that stuff. And for a while, I know it was a trend, and this was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, where, one group of people would do the leasing, and this was especially true at lease-ups, and then another group of people would take care of the residents after they moved in. Well, the thing is, the person that you lease an apartment from, that leasing person, that's the first person that you build that relationship with. And they leased because of you, because they had trust and they had confidence in you. So you don't want to sever that relationship. You want to really maintain that. And also something to always keep in mind too is, be excited. Be excited to keep that relationship going. Remember that, these are the folks that are paying your next month's bills, and they're the folks that are referring future residents to you. So treat them that. All right, let's go ahead and jump into thought number 1, types of prospects. And if you've been on our recent webinars, you've heard us talk a lot about segmenting our audiences. This is where we identify, where prospects and residents are in the life cycle of being a resident. Well, this is also really important when talking about closing techniques. As salespeople, we have to know where our prospects are in the buying cycle. If we misidentify them or just lump everyone into one group, we end up giving people the wrong message that's not relevant. And it's oftentimes the wrong message at the wrong time. So the first thing we want to talk about is when you start thinking about your closing techniques, you must remember these 3 messages. Why lease now, why lease here, and why lease from you. They're the questions your prospects need you to answer. They most likely won't come right out and ask. It's not like they're going to say, why lease here? It's, most of them aren't usually that direct. but it's in the back of their minds, and it's something that they're asking themselves when they're trying to form an opinion about you and the property. So don't forget, you have to find out what's moving them forward, what's holding them back, and what they're evaluating to make that decision. So make sure during your pitch, during your conversations, that you're answering these 3 questions. So the first type of prospect that we want to talk about is this guy. The guy that says, "I'm just looking." You have to know what type of prospect you're getting into so that you can ensure that you're not in a rush to attempt to close them before they're ready. So the guy that says, "I'm just looking," we all know this person. I'm probably the queen of saying "I'm just looking" when I really want you to leave me alone. I say this all the time. But usually this person truly is just looking. He isn't convinced yet he wants to make a move, so he's probably a bit skeptical too. Now, of course, when you have someone that's skeptical and they're not even sure if they want to move, you don't rush in with that close. These people, they're typically toying with the idea. They might be comfortable with where they are, or they might be unsure about the market, or maybe they're hesitating because of uncertainty in, current financial situations, whatever it may be. But do not jump to why they should buy now, why they should lease from you now. Instead, focus on why changing their situation will improve their lives. So this is how you start to get down that path of closing this guy. You start to educate and expose him on why living at your property is going to be better. It's going to improve their situation and what you can do for them. Now, the next category of prospects and future residents is this person. I need to be convinced. This is the person that knows that they're going to make a change, but they're not sure what that change is going to be yet. They know they need to know why they should lease from you, why they should buy into moving to your property, and they need you to get them there. These types of prospects, they need to be convinced that your property is the only place for them, and it's the best one that fits their needs. And then finally, we have this person, the tell me more person. This type of prospect is the type of prospects that we get most excited about. And it's definitely the one that we want to see all the time, because they're the ones that they're ready to lease. They know what they want, and they're just trying to determine who they're going to lease from. They're ready to make that move. They've probably decided on a submarket. They're just in that final decision moment. So what they need from you is they need to hear why you're the best option for them. And keep in mind, it's not just why your property is the best option, but why you, as a representation of your property and as a person and as someone that they're building that relationship with, is the best option. And I started to allude to this a little bit before, but you have to think about motivation. You've got to find out what's compelling them forward, what's holding them back, and how to close that procrastination gap. It's pretty easy to procrastinate and to get to a point where we're out of time to make decisions and to evaluate our options. So you want to close that gap. Find out why they want to move and what the reward for them for moving is. That reward could be something that's financial. It could be, being closer to work or closer to their kids' school. It could be, a better lifestyle, whatever it may be. You have to find out what that reward is, so that you can know the motivation and know better how to close them. All right, so moving on to thought number 2, the problem with options. People very quickly go from motivated to overwhelmed. This is really important to keep in mind, especially if you're someone, like me and probably like a lot of us, that we really thrive on options and choices and change. But a lot of people don't. You get excited, you want to see all these options, and you have this motivation, and then it's very overwhelming once you see, 5 6, even only 3 properties that all look so similar and that have 10 units available at each of them, whatever it may be. You have to be able to focus them in on the right things that's important to them that they value, so that that motivation stays very high and so that you're not overwhelming them. And when there's too many things to choose from, there's too many options, information overload takes hold. People make poor decisions. They delay decisions altogether, or they check out mentally. You must avoid killing the sale. Keep the deal moving forward by eliminating these excessive choices. I have a perfect example. I worked at Ellis a long time ago, and they had 22 floor plans. Yes, they actually had 22 floor plans that they presented to prospects as options. So imagine in a lease-up environment when, it is possible that 22 different floor plans are available. It was a bit ridiculous because there were so many floor plans. That meant, we had almost 10 different one-bedrooms. And did every prospect need to see every single one-bedroom? Of course not. So it was very evident very quickly that we had to ask the right questions to ensure that we showed them the right one-bedrooms. Maybe closet space is very important, so they didn't see the one-bedroom that just had the wall closet. Maybe they wanted a unit that had a dining room, whatever it may be. But only show them the units that fit what they wanted, and get even more specific with asking the right questions to make sure you can find those units. Ask questions like, what size of furniture do they have? What do they like to entertain at home? Whatever it may be. You want to dig a little bit deeper so that you're eliminating a lot of those choices, so that you're eliminating that procrastination. And it's really easy to get lost in the details, so it's your job to eliminate options along the way. Make sure you read ambiguity so that your prospects don't quit before they have a chance to. Even if prospects resist, our help at first, our desire to help eliminate some of that ambiguity, they realize that it's a good thing, because we want to make it easy for them to accomplish their goal. They tend to appreciate that help and that attention. However, I will say, be very aware of your language. Customers shouldn't feel like you're forcing them to lease from you, or that you're forcing them down a path that they may not be comfortable with. You can instead try to use language that makes it sound like you're helping to guide them a decision. Say things like, which would you prefer, A or B, rather than think it over and let me know. Really try to be involved and help guide them to the right solution. And the fact is, if you eliminate excessive choices, you'll be the hero the hero at the end that eliminates that really annoying, awful apartment hunt, because you found the right place for them. Alright, moving on to thought number 3, closing techniques. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is where we're going to go through a set of very specific tips, so be ready to take a few notes. So the first tip on closing techniques is set goals. We've always heard that individuals with very clear and written and concise goals are significantly more likely to succeed than those without those clearly defined goals. But I want you to set those goals. I don't want you to look at only individual goals. Set goals for your entire team. Set goals for the entire region, maybe even the company as a whole. And make sure that those goals are more than just your leasing team. Include the maintenance as well. I think we so often leave maintenance teams out, or we put them in their own silo, but they have a huge role when it comes to customer management and customer experience and closing that deal. And I know some people are against tracking closing ratios, and it's probably this never-ending debate our industry will always have, but I think it's really important. I wouldn't look at that closing ratio alone, but I think you can look at it when you're also rating the quality of the leads that you're getting, because it's a very important number to evaluate when you're trying to determine if you've achieved your goals. So once you set your quarterly or monthly goals, identify how you can improve your rates, whether it's improve that closing ratio, improve the number of prospects coming in your door, whatever it may be. Make sure you identify how you're going to measure that. And monitor your progress really carefully, because you don't want to just kind of turn it into this very robotic system. You want to be able to make changes quickly. You want to be able to make, changes on the fly. You want to be able to see patterns, and be aware of what's happening so that you can react appropriately. So tip 2, listen, and then listen some more. In the first few minutes of any sales interaction, I wish you remember 3 rules. The first one is, do not talk about yourself. The second rule is, do not talk about your prospects your apartments or your services. And number 3, do not deliver a sales pitch. So of course it's important to introduce yourself with your name and, welcome them to the property, but then stop there. It's now time to give your prospect the spotlight. Focus on asking them questions, because only when they speak will you know how to close them, and if you have a good chance of closing them, and where they are in the life cycle of being a resident and of being a prospect in this whole apartment search. You want to be able to hear everything that they have, that they're experiencing, what their goals are, what they have going on. And the only way to do that is if you stop talking. You have to give them the stage. If you dominate the conversation early, it'll probably take you a while to get, back on track and to know where your prospect is and what they're thinking. And by the time that happens, you've lost a lot of really valuable time, and they may have already checked out and decided that, you're not the right property for them. Tip number 3, sell with questions. And sell with questions instead of answers. When you ask the right questions, your prospect's going to provide, all the answers you need. The most important questions to ask are those that identify your prospect's pain points, or the areas where, she might need the most assistance. Things like, what are the biggest challenges with your current apartment community? What do you love about your current home? Why are you looking in this certain submarket? Whatever it may be. What's motivating you to move? What's motivating you to lease? We know moving's a pain, so why do you want to move? What made them feel the need to visit your property? All of these things are really good questions to ask. And going back to the first point, ask them what their goals are. If you focus on how you can help them achieve their goals, they're going to be that much closer to leasing with you. All right, so tip number 4, have a conversation. Talk with your prospects like they're friends and family. I think prospects are expecting a sort of used car salesman approach right now because, there's so many apartments, there's so many renters. They know we see a lot of people every day, so they probably don't have high expectations for that relationship building conversation. So surprise them. Whether it's a phone call, it's an email, Skype, or an in-person visit, it should be a very friendly conversation. Remember, your main goal is not to sell. Your main goal is to identify the pain points and to provide a solution. So I want you to be conversational and be very friendly, but speak professionally. But do it in your own voice, your own tone, your own words. Of course, that means no swearing, no slang, but sound like a normal person. There's never a time that's a push into sales mode. Persuasion techniques and cheesy taglines, none of that's ever acceptable. This is all about finding the right home and helping your prospect achieve their goals, which is finding them the right home. Tip 5, remove fear. And you can remove fear by selling value. I think everybody knows how strong the apartment market is right now. All we hear about, whether you're in the industry or not, is the demand for apartments. They see all the cranes in the sky. They know how much building is going on. And so prospects are probably starting to get a little bit price sensitive because they know that they're getting pushed out of certain markets that they could have lived in, a year or 2 years ago. So your first step is going to be demonstrating your value. And to do that, you have to educate your prospect about the entire process, not just the apartment. What it's like to move in, what it's like to be a resident, how easy is it to pay rent online, how easy is it to submit service requests. Educate them on everything, not just the specific unit that they're living in, because you want to give them a taste of your entire customer experience to help sell that value of living with you. All right, tip number 6, make it easy, because there's nothing worse than ending a great conversation and a great, prospect experience with some really clunky technology when it comes to leasing apartments. So make sure your technology is up to speed with prospect and market expectations. People want to be able to sign leases online. They want to be able to pay rent online, and they don't want to have to do it in a very clunky manner that doesn't provide them with a sense of security about their information going out on the web. This means things like e-signatures and online leasing. They have to be in place. Same thing goes for really good and on-point email communication. We just wrapped up about 36 surveys, focus groups for a client in multifamily. And one of the properties that has a fairly younger demographic, they were all Gen X or Gen Y for the most part, their unanimous number one method of communication was email, 100% email. So what's important here to know is that they want the email communication, but they want really good email communication. They want things to be easy for them. They want it to be concise and clear and brief. They want to be able to handle everything online and have the technology that's needed to support, the ease of living at your property. All right, so tip number 7, and this is the last tip. Plan the next step at the end of every interaction with your prospect. It's important to plan the next step, whether it's setting up the next visit, whether it's, planning to follow up on when they're going to submit their lease or their application, whatever it may be. Always plan that next step and always be thinking about it. But on a different level, make sure that you're always thinking about your personal next steps too. What did you learn from this prospect? How are you going to modify the leasing process and the experience based on what you learned? Do you need better technology? Do you need to get maintenance more involved? Do they need to be able to see who maintenance is before they lease? So make sure you're always planning that next step for your prospect, but the next step for you to make sure that you're constantly evolving and improving your leasing experience. All right, we have just a few minutes left, and we're moving on to thought number 4, the final tips. Never, ever stop selling. And I think we started the presentation with this idea. Whether you realize it or not, prospects can sense that you're just not that interested in them once they've signed. Residents can sense that. They know whether or not you're all about that lease or whether or not you really want to build that relationship and create a great customer experience for them. So if you're not really into them after they sign that lease, stop it. Be excited. Remember that these are the people that are paying your bills. They're the people that are sending, future prospects your way. They're the people writing reviews, and they have the word of mouth that we all love. So treat them that way. As long as they feel just as wanted after they've signed that lease, you'll fend off that buyer's remorse, and you're going to build that loyalty because they have this relationship with you, and they feel good, and they feel like they can trust you, and they feel confident. And something else to keep in mind, to decrease, move-out rates, and to increase customer satisfaction, and to increase referrals, never stop selling. Then I want to wrap up with just one more thought. And I'm not sure how many of you out there are Tony Robbins fans, but I am a big Tony Robbins fan. I think he's got all sorts of great pearls of wisdom. So this tip here is one of my new favorites I wanted to share with all of you. which is do what you did in the beginning of the relationship and there won't be an end. You know, I think this is something that we should think about in not just in leasing, but in every interaction we have with everyone, because it's so important that, you know, we don't think of our residents as being dispensable or replaceable, where, oh, they move out, that's fine. We can get that unit filled in a week or whatever it may be. You know, we want to treat that relationship very highly and value it throughout its entire existence. So I definitely recommend, you know, reading some more about Tony Robbins. I highly recommend his TED Talks, checking out his podcast. He's much more than a motivational speaker, and he has all sorts of good ideas that I think you can apply. All right, so before we get to a few questions, I'm going to quickly wrap up with our takeaways and some other information. So we talked about the 3 different types of prospects. We also talked about how important it is to eliminate excessive options. You know, ask the right questions so that you can find out what your prospect's really looking for and steer them that direction. Then we talked about 7 specific closing techniques, and then we had a couple of final tips. All right, so this is where Naomi typically tells us about services that are offered by Ellis Partners and Renter's Voice. You know, like I mentioned before, we have a ratings and review site. That's Renter's Voice. We also offer resident surveys, some really great and valuable information that you can get from your residents on what it's like to live at your